G'day, and welcome to part 3 of this series on repainting the club Burrell. And holy moly, what is that marked out in white pencil on the box bracket? Oh yeah, it's lining. So what you see here is my first attempt at doing lining on the traction engine. I did buy a cheap toolbox a wee while ago, and I decided to paint that Quaker green and did a practice run at lining that. And I felt reasonably happy with how that turned out, so I thought I'll swallow my pride and we'll get into doing the Burrell. So Burrell lining tends to follow a few simple rules for the most part. Roughly speaking, most components, they receive 1 inch of black, 3/8 of an inch of red, then between 7/8 to an inch of a gap, and then 1/8 yellow. And that's fairly consistent over most parts of the engine, bar 1 or 2. And so when I'm doing the lining, I'll remember those measurements, and if there's any bits where the measurements waver, I'll try and remember what they were, and I'll let you know. This is just in case you happen to want to do lining on a Burrell of your own or something like that. Suddenly being able to breathe again once the lining on the box bracket was done, I then started to put a few bits and pieces back on. Burrell yellow is quite an interesting one. It's quite a dark sort of a yellow. However, when you put it on against a colour like Quaker green or even a red or something, it comes up, looking very bright. You can see there I played around with the tint quite a bit to try and get it about right. I believe the colour is actually chrome yellow, in case you need that for a reference or something. The yellow I used on the box bracket is not quite right, but because it's only one piece and you can only really see it from one angle and it's quite far away from other bits and pieces, it's not really that noticeable, so I don't tell anybody, but I just let that one slide. And then came the belly tank. Wowee, that took quite a long time to mark out. I think in hindsight I probably did a little bit too much marking out, but because this was my first attempt, I just didn't want to screw it up. And so again, the yellow went on first, and then the black, and then the red. In hindsight I probably would have done the black first, and then the red, and then the yellow. Maybe, but anyways, it was a first go, and I don't think it turned out too bad. Again, for a first attempt, I was doing it all on a wing and a prayer, and that's the result. The four-carriage top as well got a bit of a treatment. Again, this is the Burrell standard lining for a four-carriage top. Now, I think that wasn't an inch black. I think that was actually maybe 3/4, or maybe, was it 3/4 of an inch? I think it was, of the black, but the other two measurements are the same. More bits and pieces started to go back together on the footplate as well, the injector. Throughout this process as well, all of the handles for the valves, I took them all off individually and I blued them all, just because black paint does start to wear off after a while, and I felt like if I blued them it might perhaps last a little bit longer, and it's quite an old method of turning something black as opposed to just painting it. So yeah, just something I decided to do. Now for the double spur hood. This was actually something I really enjoyed doing. That was that's quite a nice piece with the sweeping curves and good flat surfaces, and so that was again marked out. And do you remember in part 1 the original lining that showed up on that? Well, that conveniently worked out really well. I just copied it exactly how it was, and I think the black on the outside of that was less than an inch as well. It might have been half an inch, or again 3/4, I can't remember off the top of my head. You can see there as well the footplate is now just about all back together, bar a few pieces, but I think it's, comparing it to previous parts, it really is starting to look a little bit better. I also took the top plate, which goes over the top of the clutch levers, and shined that up as well, so that's all finished bright now too. Then onto the front box bracket, that got black, red and yellow lining yet again. That was all fairly simple, fairly straightforward, just the standard measurements there. The next thing to address were the clutches. As you can see, they are pretty sorry looking, very mucky, not very nicely painted, and so then they started to come to bits, and so piece by piece they were disassembled and cleaned up and made ready to be painted. I started with third gear and then went over to first and second as well. What you'll notice too about the forks is that they've been built up quite a lot with a bit of bronze over the years to build them back up, and they've obviously done a bit of work and they've worn out, so that was quite an interesting find. I also decided to line the horn plates. I didn't go all the way around, as you can see, because the gap between the wheel and the horn plate was just a bit too tight, and I knew that if I tried getting in there I was just going to mess it up, so I decided to leave that until a day where the back wheels are off and I can get in there. The steerer's seat also got repainted into black along with the bracket that holds it on. These before had of course been graced by the magic red paintbrush, and so it was quite nice to sort that out. This seat was actually made by a company called P&D Duncan, as you can see, and P&D Duncan were quite a well-known company for making hauling wagons and that sort of thing here in Christchurch. Then one by one the clutches started to get painted and put all back together. I also took the first gear off and gave that a really good shine up with the cut brush, and then a bit of Scotch-Brite and WD-40. I think I forgot to mention that actually, is a lot of the time to finish things off to get them really shiny I just use Scotch-Brite and WD-40, and that seems to work mint every time. After that as well, I reconnected up all of the pipe work, and then the footplate was basically all back together and ready to go for the next time the engine was running. And now finally here you see a time lapse of me putting the lines on one side of the tender. This video is actually already on YouTube. I uploaded this ages ago, around the time I actually did it. But if you haven't seen that video, here it is again. Starting off with the black, and then the red, and then the yellow obviously after, as you probably could have guessed. And this was quite an interesting one to do, unlike a lot of the other parts where you've got an edge to kind of follow. A lot of it was sort of a bit more freehand, as the gap between the edge and the actual lines was quite large. But no, it was alright. I'm fairly happy with how it turned out. Yeah, just sit back and relax, I guess, as I paint. And there we have it, a completed driver's side of the tender. So that concludes this installment. I hope you've enjoyed it. The engine, as you can see, is still quite a long way from being anywhere near done, but there's subtle improvements every time, and again, all of this does just take a long time and it's a lot of work, but I think with the lining on, it's starting to feel more and more rewarding. So we will keep going, and we'll see you again in part 4. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you later.